Totally different. She would only speak to the audience when the cameras were rolling. As soon as they turned the cameras off, she would not even acknowledge the audience. She would just sit on the couch, basically.
Toxic, phony, hypocrite, liar. That's what she is.
On that last video about James Corden, a bunch of you rushed to the comments and kept repeating the same line again and again. You said if we're calling out fake niceness, backstage power games, and celebrities who built a whole empire on acting like saints, then we have to talk about Ellen. Because Ellen DeGeneres might be the clearest example of what happens when a perfectly polished image cracks the second people stop clapping along. For years, she sold herself as America's moral compass, the safe comic, the smiling daytime queen who danced it out, laughed it off, and told everybody to be kind. She made millions believe she was somehow floating above Hollywood drama, untouched and untouchable. No wild scandals, no messy headlines, just that calm, comfy vibe that felt easy to trust. She wasn't loud, she wasn't edgy, she wasn't shaking tables, she was safe, polished, and perfectly packaged for daytime TV. That comfort became her superpower, and nobody questioned it until the whispers got too big to ignore. And that comfort is exactly why the fall felt so brutal. When Ellen's reputation finally cracked, it wasn't some loud explosion with flashing lights and headlines screaming overnight. It broke in silence, piece by piece, story by story, until that shiny image just couldn't be glued back together again. It began the way most modern celebrity scandals do, not with proof laid out on a table, but with people talking online. No big press conference, no dramatic reveal, just an open door on social media. And once that door opened, people didn't just step in calmly, they poured in fast. What followed felt unreal, with story after story from people who said they worked near her, served her, interacted with her for a quick second, or simply crossed paths with her at the wrong time. One server claimed Ellen wrote a letter to management complaining about chipped nail polish on the server's hand, not even about the food, and that it almost cost the server their job. A former Warner Brothers employee said they were fired after holding an elevator door and politely asking what floor she wanted. Another past staffer alleged Ellen snapped at them just for making eye contact. More people described her presence as cold, awkward, even intimidating. None of it came as one giant bombshell, but together it painted a picture that didn't match the smiling, dancing, be kind brand the world had been sold for years. Individually, any one of those stories could have been brushed off as drama or exaggeration. Celebrities deal with mix-ups all the time. Bad service happens, wires get crossed, people misunderstand each other. But the real issue wasn't just one complaint, it was the sheer number of them and how similar they sounded. Different people, different cities, different years, yet they all described the same vibe, the same tension, the same feeling of walking on eggshells. They talked about fear, control, and a cold attitude toward anyone who didn't seem useful in the moment. And suddenly, that bright daytime smile didn't look so warm anymore. It started to feel like a mask hiding something else. Then former employees from her own show began speaking out publicly, and that's when everything shifted. The story moved from celebrity is rude to something way heavier and harder to ignore. People started calling it a toxic workplace, saying they were scared to speak up at all. They described managers who kept everyone quiet, staff who felt punished for taking medical leave, for grieving family members, even for having a life outside the studio. Behind the scenes, Ellen wasn't just distant, she was someone people feared. Employees said they were told not to speak to her directly, that mistakes weren't corrected, they were punished. And kindness? That only showed up when the cameras were rolling and the lights were bright. That's when the shiny brand finally split wide open. Because be kind isn't just a cute slogan you print on merch, it's a promise. And the second people believe that promise is fake, the whole thing starts falling apart fast. The jokes suddenly feel empty. The laughter sounds forced. The dancing looks staged instead of joyful. Viewers went back and rewatched old clips with fresh eyes, and moments that once seemed playful started to feel awkward and tense. Like times when Ellen snapped at audience members or made guess the punchline in a way that felt less like humor and more like control. Segments that once passed as comedy now looked like quiet power moves. It wasn't brand new behavior, it was old behavior seen in a new light. And when she finally responded, it was careful and polished, the kind of apology that sounds serious but never fully takes responsibility. She shifted the blame to management. She said she didn't know what was happening behind the scenes on her own show, promised changes, promised growth, promised it would be better. And for a short minute, people bought it. The show came back, the crowd clapped, the lights flashed, and the machine kept running like nothing happened. But something had already changed for good. The energy felt different, the trust wasn't the same, and viewers slowly started checking out. Ratings slipped, and the loyal audience that once defended her began drifting away. This was someone who had joked about serious topics before, someone close to powerful circles that were now being exposed in a harsh spotlight. Then old clips started popping back up online. Ellen laughing with Diddy, joking about his parties, casually acknowledging she knew about them at the time, and treating it like harmless fun. Back then, it seemed light, just celebrity banter. Looking back though, it hit different. It felt strange, almost unsettling. And when Joe Rogan publicly said Ellen's silence was starting to look suspicious, the conversation turned up fast. Rogan didn't throw direct accusations, he asked questions. Why does Hollywood shield certain names? Why do some celebrities get dragged non-stop while others fade away quietly without a sound? Why is Ellen suddenly nowhere to be seen when her old jokes are getting replayed under a much darker spotlight? Once that question was asked out loud, it couldn't just disappear because her whole brand was built on moral authority, on calling people out, on demanding public accountability, on turning kindness into her identity and her shield. And now that accountability circles back to her, there's nothing. No real clarification, no clear distancing, no strong acknowledgement, just silence. And silence mixed with power and serious wealth doesn't feel random. It feels strategic. That's when this story stops being only about a toxic workplace and starts looking bigger. It becomes about Hollywood culture, about who gets protected and who doesn't, about how the brightest smiles can hide the strongest control. Silence isn't neutral when you've spent decades speaking over others and setting the tone for everyone else. And this still isn't the most uncomfortable part. When you line up the workplace allegations, the sudden move out of the country, the awkward comeback attempt that didn't land, and her proximity to figures now facing major public scrutiny, the pattern starts to raise eyebrows. Nothing here is proven criminal, nothing is confirmed as illegal, but the overall picture feels tense and hard to ignore. And in Hollywood, discomfort is powerful, because the second people stop clapping and start questioning, the whole illusion begins to shake. Once Ellen's name started getting whispered in the same conversations as Diddy, the whole vibe around her changed fast. Not because anyone proved she committed a crime, not because there was a charge with her name on it, but because in Hollywood, proximity counts. Who you laugh with, who you defend, who you stay quiet for, all of that becomes evidence in the court of public opinion, and that court moves quick. When Diddy was arrested and later faced serious allegations, the internet did what it always does, it started digging. Old interviews popped up, old clips resurfaced, old jokes that once sounded harmless suddenly felt heavy. And in that pile of footage were moments where Ellen wasn't just casually around him, she was laughing about his parties, joking about hotel rooms, smiling through late-night talk that now hits different. Back then, it was brushed off as playful celebrity banter, just famous people talking big, but with public allegations of trafficking, coercion, and abuse now tied to his circle, those same jokes don't land the same way at all. There's one clip especially that made people pause. Diddy joking that the real parties start after midnight on the top floors of hotels. In a new context, that line doesn't sound light anymore. It sounds loaded, and that shift is what changed everything. Ellen laughs and answers like she already knows what he's talking about. Not shocked, not confused, just comfortable, like it's all familiar territory. And that familiarity is what made people uneasy fast. Because once you understand what those parties are now publicly alleged to have involved, that same laugh doesn't feel light anymore. It feels tense, almost chilling in hindsight. Context changes everything, and suddenly, a simple reaction starts looking loaded. Joe Rogan was one of the first big voices to say what a lot of people were thinking out loud. He didn't accuse Ellen of being part of Diddy's alleged crimes, and he didn't claim she knew specific details. What he questioned was the silence. Why were some celebrities quick to distance themselves, release statements, and make their positions clear, while Ellen seemed to vanish from the conversation completely? Why does her name feel untouchable in certain circles? Rogan framed it as Hollywood protecting its favorites. The people who are too valuable, too connected, too polished to be challenged directly. And when he said that, it struck a nerve, because Ellen fits that image almost perfectly. She wasn't just a talk show host, she was a gatekeeper, a kingmaker, someone who could lift a career up or ice it out with one smile on daytime TV. And when a person with that kind of influence suddenly goes quiet during a massive scandal, powerful people don't automatically assume innocence, they assume strategy. That's why her sudden move to the UK raised so many eyebrows. Officially, it was framed as politics, as wanting peace, as stepping away from the noise in America. But the timing hit hard. She left right as Diddy's legal troubles escalated and more celebrity names started circulating online. Fair or unfair, it didn't matter. To a lot of observers, it looked like an exit plan. Hollywood loves a clean getaway, and Ellen's entire post-show life has felt carefully managed. No long interviews, no tough conversations, no public grilling, just polished Instagram posts, quiet countryside views, animal photos, and soft retirement vibes. It's rebranding through distance, staying visible but untouchable. But distance doesn't erase memory when the internet keeps receipts. As more Diddy-related details surfaced publicly, people began connecting dots that had been sitting there for years. And suddenly, Ellen's past reputation for tight control and strict environments didn't feel random anymore. It felt like part of a bigger pattern people could no longer ignore. Her reported behind-the-scenes cruelty, her ability to command silence without raising her voice, her alleged rule that no one should speak to her unless she spoke first, all of that started sounding heavier once new stories came out. And now even audience members are speaking up about what they experienced firsthand. One woman, Dana DeMaio, shared how she went from excited to deeply uncomfortable in a single day. Back in 2018, she flew from Chicago to Los Angeles, thrilled just to sit in the crowd and maybe get a moment with Ellen. She was even picked out of the audience for a comedy bit, which felt like a dream at first. But she later said she was shocked by how things felt behind the scenes, even after being briefed by producers about how the segment would go. Ellen's motto has always been, "Be kind." But Dana claimed that the energy she felt that day didn't match that message at all. It raised a bigger question people started asking everywhere. How does the Ellen we see on TV compare to the Ellen people say they experience when the cameras stop rolling? Former staff even described something they called the Ellen stare, a silent look that made people feel small without a single word being said. And when you line those traits up next to public allegations about other powerful figures who allegedly ruled through fear and loyalty, the comparison gets uncomfortable. Not identical, not the same, but close enough to make people pause and start asking serious questions. That's why the rumors spread so fast. Not because everything was proven in court, but because public trust had already cracked wide open. Once people start believing you're capable of cruelty, they begin to wonder what else you're capable of. And Ellen didn't really step in to slow that perception down. The silence, the distance, the careful messaging, it all added to the tension instead of calming it. Even her Netflix stand-up special felt to many viewers less like reflection and more like damage control. She framed the backlash as if she was canceled over one tweet, one misunderstanding, one moment that got blown out of proportion, but a lot of people knew that wasn't the full story. The controversy wasn't about one tiny slip. It was about repeated workplace allegations and a pattern people had been talking about for years. She didn't directly address specific claims about the work environment. She didn't clearly apologize to those who said they lost jobs, career growth, or peace of mind during that time. Instead, she joked about being misunderstood, about being tough, about how not everyone can handle blunt honesty. For some viewers, that bold tone felt strong and refreshing. For others, it felt dismissive, almost like their concerns were being brushed aside. Self-awareness isn't the same thing as accountability, and the reviews showed that split clearly. Half the audience seemed ready to move on and forgive. The other half saw the special as a polished closing statement, more defense than confession, and that's what makes Ellen's situation feel different from a typical cancellation story. She wasn't taken down by one single scandal. She was slowly hollowed out by accumulation, by years of small cracks that finally became impossible to hide. It wasn't one headline that shifted everything. It was a buildup. Years of reported behavior catching up at once. Years of silence suddenly being interpreted not as innocence, but as intention. Then, the Rogan conversation ripped the wound back open. Because he didn't just drop her name casually, he placed her inside a larger system. A system where powerful figures protect each other until protecting each other becomes impossible. A system where polished smiles can cover uncomfortable truths, where silence holds value, and where access means protection. And once that system starts getting questioned in public, everyone connected to it feels the heat. Ellen built her empire on moral authority, on calling others out, on playfully embarrassing guests, on always holding the mic and steering the room. But now that the mic is turned toward her, she chooses not to answer, and that silence speaks louder than any joke ever did. That's why the public isn't dropping this, because even if Ellen was never charged with a crime, many people feel her reported behavior reflects the same kind of arrogance that let worse figures operate unchecked for years. That belief that rules don't fully apply when you're powerful. That kindness can be a brand on camera while harshness happens off camera. That status can shield you forever, but history keeps showing that no shield lasts forever. Now things have shifted into a new phase. Ellen's legacy isn't fully hers to shape anymore. It's being rewritten through former employees speaking out, resurfaced clips spreading online, investigative podcasts digging deeper, and cultural memory that doesn't reset with a new season. Ratings can be managed, PR can be polished, but public perception online is harder to steer once it turns. For her, the real fear might not be legal danger, but irrelevance mixed with suspicion, being remembered not for dancing or catchphrases, but for silence during moments when people wanted clarity. Because today, silence doesn't automatically read as peaceful, it can feel strategic, even defensive. The hardest question surrounding Ellen isn't about courtrooms or charges, it's about power, about how influence works in entertainment, who gets protected, who gets questioned, and what happens when the spotlight finally flips direction. The real question people keep asking is this: why does she seem to survive while others fall hard? When you study the pattern, Ellen didn't just get canceled and disappear overnight, she stepped away cleanly. She cashed out at the right time, sold properties, relocated, and quietly shifted into a new chapter. Meanwhile, some of the people who said they were hurt in the process were left dealing with the fallout on their own. To many observers, that doesn't look random. That looks like leverage. Hollywood rarely protects someone just because they're nice. It protects people who are useful, deeply connected, or simply too complicated to challenge directly. And Ellen spent decades building herself into all three categories. She wasn't only a daytime host with a dance segment, she became a brand-safe gatekeeper sitting right at the center of media networks, advertisers, major celebrities, and powerful corporate partnerships. When someone holds that many relationships at once, walking away quietly can look less like luck and more like strategy. She knew everyone. She moved in powerful circles, heard private conversations, understood how the industry really worked. Not in some dramatic movie way, but in the quiet, connected, behind-the-scenes way that only longtime insiders do. And that kind of knowledge, even when it's never spoken out loud, carries weight. That's why Joe Rogan's comments landed so hard. Not because he accused her of a specific crime, but because he questioned the selective outrage. Why do some names get blasted instantly while others are treated gently? Why does the media seem cautious around Ellen when she's been socially and publicly connected to people who are now facing serious allegations? The answer many people point to isn't complicated. It's fear and self-preservation. Big networks, big brands, big partnerships. Nobody wants unnecessary smoke. What really shifted is that Ellen didn't just lose popularity, she lost control of the narrative. And for someone whose whole career was built on controlling the room, steering the mood, and holding the mic, that loss hits deep. You could sense it in her final seasons. The laughter felt tight. The recycled clips felt safe. The energy looked lower, almost distant. Some viewers saw burnout, others saw frustration. It seemed like she couldn't fully grasp why the audience had turned, almost as if she believed she had earned a level of immunity. That's why her Netflix special felt off to so many people. It wasn't really a comeback, it felt more like a plea wrapped in sarcasm, a request for forgiveness without a clear confession. She framed herself as misunderstood instead of responsible, as hurt instead of possibly harmful. For some loyal fans, that angle worked. But for many others, it only confirmed what they already suspected, that she still didn't fully grasp why people were upset. And then there's the Diddy connection, which could end up shaping how parts of the public remember her. Not because she's been proven guilty of anything, but because optics matter in celebrity culture. Silence matters. Timing matters. When someone with influence chooses not to speak during a moment when a simple statement could clarify, reassure, or create distance, people start filling in the blanks themselves. And when that same person built a career on calling others out publicly, the contrast feels sharp. Ellen used to put guests on the spot, reveal secrets, push for confessions, and laugh while doing it. That was part of her brand. Bold, playful, in control. But now that the spotlight has flipped toward her, she's asking for privacy, and the public has never reacted kindly to what it sees as hypocrisy. What makes the situation feel heavier is how the industry still seems to move carefully around her, almost like everyone understands the power she once held and isn't eager to challenge it directly. Mainstream media barely dives into the Diddy and Ellen overlap. Major outlets avoid speculation. Big interviews steer clear of the topic, and the whole connection gets treated like radioactive material. And that silence doesn't calm people down. It actually feeds more suspicion. Because when a story is completely false, it usually gets debunked loudly and clearly. But when something feels risky or complicated, it often gets brushed aside quietly. The internet sees that difference fast, and unlike traditional media, it doesn't wait for official permission to start connecting dots. It doesn't need indictments to form opinions. It watches behavior, it tracks patterns, it notices who speaks up and who suddenly disappears. When Ellen stays quiet, many online don't read that as peaceful reflection. They read it as strategy. That's why her legacy feels unfinished right now. There's no clear redemption arc, no deep public reckoning, just distance. And distance doesn't repair a reputation, it locks it in the last tense moment people remember. At the same time, culture kept moving. Daytime television shifted, influencer-driven media started replacing traditional hosts. And while the industry evolved, Ellen's presence faded into the background, leaving questions hanging in the air instead of being answered. Audiences today expect transparency, not just polish. They want vulnerability, not tight control over every question and every headline. And to many critics, Ellen represents the opposite of this new era. She represents a time when power could smile brightly, dance on cue, and never have to explain itself. That era is fading fast, and maybe that's the real reason this conversation refuses to disappear. Ellen isn't viewed by some as just one individual anymore. She's become a symbol of a larger system, a system where kindness can be marketed like a product, where harsh behavior can stay hidden behind closed doors, and where consequences don't always reach the top of the ladder. That perception alone has reshaped how people see her. So whether or not her name ever shows up in court documents, whether or not she directly addresses the Diddy situation in detail, her public image has already changed. She's no longer widely seen as the untouchable be kind icon. For many, she's now remembered as the exception, the one who seemed to slip through the fallout, the one who kept smiling while others faced the storm. And that's not the kind of legacy you clean up with a stand-up special, a glossy documentary, or a few carefully filtered Instagram posts. That kind of reputation hangs in the air. It sticks to your name, it follows old clips, it lives in comment sections and late-night debates. So what do you think? Is Ellen just another case of bad timing mixed with internet pile-ons? Or does her silence speak louder than any perfectly crafted statement ever could? When someone who built a brand on calling people out suddenly goes quiet, does that mean growth, strategy, or something else entirely? And be honest, do you think Hollywood is still shielding her? Or are we just in the calm before another wave hits? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I really do read them. Let's talk about it. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who loves deep dives into YouTuber drama, influencer controversies, and the conversations most platforms avoid. Because this story doesn't feel finished yet. And if the internet has proven anything, it's that the next twist is always one headline away. I'll see you in the next one.